The Memphis Grizzlies have now won 6 games in a row, putting them at second in the West, only half a game behind the first-seeded Pelicans. With how seemingly open the conference is, many believe them to be a team capable of making it to the NBA Finals and even potentially winning it. But just how good are they, and are they serious championship contenders? Their offensive scheme is very Ja Morant centric, meaning that when he's on the court, they run just about everything through him on the ball. He's one of the best rim shot creators the league has ever seen, possessing a rare combination of explosiveness, functional athleticism, and masterful ball handling that allows him to get deep into the heart of the defense seemingly whenever he wants. Even the best of the best units are left incapable of slowing him down. No matter what type of coverages or looks they throw at him, they just can't stop him from touching the paint. And that's because he has a counter for everything. He can change speeds and direction at will, is comfortable doing anything with a live dribble, and can gather through traffic in tons of different ways with the use of lengthy strides. You'll often see him stay low to the ground like this to finish with that length, stepping through little gaps in the defense where he can carve out easier angles to the cup, but he can also go airborne. He's an acrobat, exploding off the floor with a 44-inch vertical and flying through the air while maintaining perfect balance and never losing control of his body. He can adjust his shot or body angle with ease to score through the trees, where he's got phenomenal touch and an arsenal consisting of just about any finish you can possibly think of. From a bit further, he can punish teams with the use of a floater, getting really high before releasing to dodge the outstretched arms of rim protectors, and he's even added a little mid-range pull-up to his game as yet another effective counter. He's also pretty serviceable as a pull-up three-point shooter. He won't actively hunt for them, but if given to him can catch a rhythm and do some real damage, and once that threat is established, he'll start to throw some hesitations to open up his driving game even more. He can do this at a really high pace. That pairing of speed and length in the open floor is lethal, generating tons of transition opportunities that Memphis is able to capitalize on for more than 17 fast break points a game, good for third in the NBA. A majority of his offense is generated through the pick and roll though, where no coverage is really an answer to slow him down. When bigs play at the level, it's almost impossible to contain him. He splits doubles and traps without much difficulty, can blow by anyone who stands in his way in space, or he'll reject the screen and explode in the opposite direction with nobody in position. When opponents go to a softer coverage, such as drop, he'll play a much more methodical, patient approach, where he'll put defenders in jail to block their recovery and play the in-between game, where he can probe with a live dribble to hunt for a floater, or somehow manufacture a new driving angle out of thin air. One of the reasons this works so well is because that initial screen puts his defender out of position, and because he plays 75% of his minutes next to Steven Adams, he's able to get to those spots at an even higher rate. Adams might just be the best screener in the sport. He's a massive body with an absurd amount of strength and power who always hangs around the elbow or nail, where he's in position to put a roadblock in the path of perimeter defenders. He's also a pretty skilled passer that's comfortable handling the ball, which allows him to serve as a dribble handoff initiator or just central passing hub, which not only gets Ja and other ball handlers going off of movement, but with a more open lane as his man is forced to step out a bit further, opening up his signature one-handed bounce to cutters. On the roll, he's not a guy who's diving downhill and looking to get above the rim, but trails those attacks to the basket well for easy passing angles where he can go to quick hooks, floaters, or just finish with size while punishing switches. Most of the time, he's trailing for an opportunity to crash the glass. Because Morant draws so much attention and is willing to go up in traffic, he creates a decent amount of opportunities, while Adams is probably the game's best offensive rebounder. This is now his second season in a row, leading the league in offensive rebounds, and as a team, the Grizzlies also lead the league, generating lots of second chance points as a result. For that reason, he requires a body on the crash, and having a guy who requires some attention down low himself, that also actively helps in getting an all-time great slasher even more paint touches, consistently forces defenses into rotation. And because Morant has those counters for just about every coverage, he's able to break the defense down, draw tons of added attention, and create for teammates. Because the goal is to prevent him from ever touching the paint, these breakdowns are usually caused at the point of attack, where he can make reads as a playmaker from the perimeter. He's primarily opening up jump shooters, which he's able to take advantage of due to having the range and velocity on his passes needed to get the ball to any spot on the floor quickly. He does still create a fair share of opportunities at the rim though, looking off these shooters to send help on closeouts, lobbing it through tight windows to rollers or backdoor cutters, or taking it all the way in and laying it down to a teammate on the interior. Memphis also likes to take advantage of this passing ability by weaponizing his scoring threat to initiate off-ball actions, like here where he rejects the initial screen and darts towards the paint where he draws a second defender, leaving Desmond Bane wide open on the wing for 3. Bane's an otherworldly shooter of the basketball, knocking down just under 44% of his threes on over 7 attempts a game over the last 2 seasons, with ridiculous versatility. He's an off-ball master, involved in tons of different screening actions, constantly relocating and repositioning himself on the perimeter, or coming off of handoffs where he's knocked down from every single spot on the floor while moving in any direction. He's also great off the bounce, with quick trigger pull-up triples or step backs to create some more separation, which has been huge in his overall development, as he was creating at an entirely different level before missing time with an injury. He's also another guy who can run that two-man game with Steven Adams to near perfection, coming off of screens, handoffs, and high pick and rolls with the option to torch weaker coverages from deep or attack into open space with a pull-up mid-range game, decent floater, and occasional drive all the way to the rim. He can also fake the use of screens and backdoor when being hugged on the perimeter, like here coming off a curl at the top of the key that Brooklyn shuts down, before initiating a give and go with Adams, where his capabilities as a facilitator and opening of the lane lead to a cutting layup. Bane will also capitalize on the gravity he holds as an elite movement shooter to open up teammates. He took massive strides as both a passer and decision maker with the ball, which have turned him into a legitimate number 2 creator. An elite off-ball shooter who demands attention on the perimeter like a legitimate primary offensive option that can also put the ball down for attacks with the ability to create for himself and others, next to an all-time great driver, finisher, and volume lead playmaker, is a backcourt pairing on offense that not many teams in NBA history can compete with. Over the last 2 seasons, Ja and Bane have played over 1,300 minutes together, and in that time, the Grizzlies have had an offensive rating of about 120. Just surrounding these two with competent role players offers a pretty high floor on that end. Jaren Jackson Jr. is a pretty solid shooter. He's tall with a really quick release and comfortable from longer range or off of screens, making him tough to bother. He's also a strong cutter and athletic finisher who takes advantage of mismatches with quick seals for post-ups or on the offensive glass, having a pretty well-rounded game as an off-ball weapon. He's a good ball handler for his size as well, with some decent slashing chops as he attacks closeouts for paint touches and gets a fair share of touches for face-up isolations. He's a solid finisher at the rim, even boasting a floater game and running hook with a phenomenal offhand, and he's great at drawing contact, getting to the line on these attacks very consistently. The only problem is that he's still a super weak passer, not really connecting the offense, but serving more as a play finisher, a role that Brandon Clarke has also stepped into in a major way. Clarke is the team's other high-volume pick-and-roll big, but unlike Adams, he is that athletic finisher with a huge above-the-rim threat. Despite only standing 6'8", he's very explosive, getting downhill and off the floor very quickly, which also makes him really good as a cutter or outlet for dump-offs down low, where he's such an efficient finisher. He's also got a short mid-range game with great use of the floater, and is another guy who can take advantage of smaller matchups with quick seals and hooks. Sticking with the theme of bigs and forwards, in Jaren's absence, it was Santi Aldama getting those minutes as the starting power forward. He's yet another big play finisher, standing 6'11" with the ability to make open threes, even in short windows without ever dipping. He uses his size and athleticism well to finish at the rim, diving off ball with strong cuts, and he has some utility as a connector, occasionally attacking closeouts and making some nice finds as a passer down low. On the wing, they've got John Conchar, an off-ball shooter who will knock down threes at a nice clip, but doesn't have that same type of movement or versatility in his shot diet. He also doesn't really have many on-ball skills, not creating much at all for himself or others, more so serving as another option as a spot-up. The same goes for new acquisition Danny Green, who hasn't yet played a game for them, but fills out a similar role. With all these play finishers who aren't really extending advantages at a high level, I think that's why Dillon Brooks is a bit more important to the working of this offense than his numbers at face value may reflect. Don't get me wrong, he definitely has destructive tendencies at times, especially with shot selection, where he may actually think he's Kobe Bryant, and when he catches fire, this could be the case, but it's not at all a consistent thing, and oftentimes just results in bad shot chucking and lots of missing, which is why his true shooting percentage of 50.2 is in the 6th percentile among all qualifying players. Still, every team needs guys who can put the ball down, be aggressive, and force the defense to react, which he does well, looking to apply pressure in some way every time he touches the ball. He's good at attacking the basket, getting to the rim at a pretty decent rate, and although he's not necessarily a great shooter, he takes them at volume with a decent degree of difficulty. The big thing is that he's a solid passer. Once that threat is established, especially if the defense already tilted towards Ja or Bane, there are so many openings to capitalize on, which leads to more opportunities for those finishers. This is also what makes Tyus Jones such a valuable piece. If you remember that crazy stat from last season, where Memphis went 17-3 without Morant, well, he was the guy stepping into that lead guard role and producing solid offense, as he's one of the best backup facilitators in the NBA. He's a pretty good pull-up jump shooter, especially from mid-range where he'll do a lot of his damage, and in these spots, he's also got an elite floater game. From these pressure points is where he makes plays for others, being a super sharp decision maker with a wide variety of passes while almost never turning the ball over. That combination of mid-range scoring and great decision making allows him to initiate in the pick and roll very effectively, while also having skills off the ball such as his positioning, shooting, and ability to extend advantages as a secondary playmaker that help him play off of Ja well. It's worth noting that despite having a decent amount of injuries that have kept key players off the floor, Memphis holds a top 10 offense in the NBA. A number that I expect to steadily increase with the return of Desmond Bane, and I definitely think this is something that can hold up in a playoff setting, as they've surrounded their versatile lead creator with a really nice infrastructure. With that being said though, it's actually their defense that I find myself being a bit higher on. But before we get into that, I want to give a quick shout out to Basketball Index for helping with this analysis and the making of this video. If you're not familiar with the site, they provide tons of statistical measurements, tools, and easily accessible graphics to further guide your understanding of the sport. They offer talent grades on pretty much any aspect of the game you can think of, and through their player profiles tab, I can easily compare them to other players around the league. Using Ja Morant's finishing as an example, on this page I'm presented with various metrics detailing his ability to create and make these shots, along with how he stacks up against his peers. This is just one of the many useful tools found on the site that help guide me and many others through their analysis, and by signing up with the code VENUE30, you can get 30% off your first month subscription. I'll leave a link in the description below for anyone interested in signing up, and with that being said, let's take a look at this Memphis defense. This is a unit of course anchored by a Defensive Player of the Year caliber guy in Jaren Jackson Jr. To start this season, he missed an extended amount of time, and in those games the Grizzlies had a defensive rating of 112.8, on par with the league's average. Since getting him back, that number's improved greatly to a 108.2, which would actually be the best defense in the NBA. And that's just the kind of game changer he is on that end, covering up everyone's mistakes while consistently making huge plays. Like here, where Tyus Jones is supposed to force the ball around a screen with Jaren in position to help, but gives up the opposite angle too easily, which results in a blow-by. But Jackson's still able to recover with an incredible save. Notice how much ground he was able to cover in such a short amount of time, as he's an extremely rangy athlete, allowing him to help and recover in various spots with ease. For this reason, he's generally used in a role that allows him to roam the floor, gapping off of weaker shooters to wreak havoc near the paint. This way, he can always be close to the basket and able to exercise his skills as an elite rim protector. On this one, his actual matchup is Herb Jones, but because Herb isn't much of a shooting threat, he's positioned right next to the basket, and when Zion starts to attack the rim, he actually slides over and switches positions with Adams to turn away the layup. His length, incredible timing, and quick bounce off the floor make him a legitimate all-time great shot blocker. Right now, he's averaging a staggering 5 blocks every 75 possessions, and that ability, along with that rangy athleticism, leave him capable of making a fair share of high leverage saves. Add in his quick hands, and now he's a plausible option for just about any type of pick and roll coverage, this time staying low and close to the ball handler as to not give him a pull-up jumper, floater, or angle to the cup, while still remaining in position to turn away the roller. He's even mobile enough to occasionally switch onto wings and offer resistance as a man defender, doing a little bit of everything to drive this unit forward. The second most important piece in the working of this defense is Dillon Brooks, as their go-to at the point of attack or for stopping wings, taking the toughest assignment on any given night and hindering their ability to generate offense as much as possible. On the ball, he's nothing short of elite. He's a pesty, aggressive, and physical man defender who loves to get right in the airspace of ball handlers and add contact to make them uncomfortable. He's got a really strong core, moving his feet well to cut off driving angles and stonewall any attempts at creating with physicality, while his active, quick hands allow him to dictate player movement and poke at the ball. He also gets through screens really well, both on and off the ball, which makes him a capable chaser, and he's really active as a helper. He does a great job at positioning himself well to turn away threats to the rim, stunts near the nail to bother drives, and gets in lanes quite a bit with those quick hands. As for the rest of the team, their options at big and forward are pretty flexible. Santi Aldama plays many roles, primarily that of help and recover, rotating to turn away threats at the rim while closing out to shooters. He's another relatively rangy athlete with size, length, and mobility to cover space, which also makes him a solid man defender, comfortable switching and matching up with various positions. He offers a decent amount of rim protection, utilizing his size and athleticism to alter shots while seemingly always in a solid position to make a play due to his constant activity. And all of these tools, of course, make him another guy who can do a decent job of defending the pick and roll. Playing the role of a more traditional anchor big is Steven Adams, whose size, length, and strength eat up space in the lane and make him a good deterrent from the rim. He's pretty good at positioning himself down low and has pretty active hands, which makes him a viable option in drop coverage, but he is still really limited athletically, and matchups that can exploit his weaknesses make him a bit harder to play, instead going to Brandon Clark. Clark's developed into a solid paint defender, not having much size or length, but that quick burst off the floor makes him really effective contesting shots at the rim. He's also just good at positioning himself and plays with a high level of activity, especially in the pick and roll, where he's another one of those mobile bigs that can successfully play various coverages. Their roster also consists of a decent amount of options for playing at the point of attack or on the wing. Ja Morant has big athletic tools, such as his speed, agility, length, and ability to explode off the floor, which allow him to occasionally make some high leverage plays, but the awareness just isn't there, having lots of off-ball lapses and a tendency to fall a bit lazy and unengaged, which can cause breakdowns. To hide this, they like to put him on the ball as much as possible, where again, those physical traits allow him to occasionally string together decent possessions, but his technique is still very off. He gets blown by at a pretty high rate while consistently dying on screens, but unlike when he's away from the ball, getting beat at the point of attack when you're surrounded by helpers, rim protectors, and rangy athletes isn't as big a deal, and in this role, he can actually tread water. This is very different from Desmond Bane, who doesn't have those great physical tools, not being too quick laterally and having a negative wingspan, sometimes doing everything right and just lacking what's necessary to make a big difference. But he does have the great technique and discipline required to defend on the ball, cutting off attack angles with good footwork and turning away drives with strength. Here he's matched up with the much bigger Lauri Markkanen attacking on the move. Aldama does a great job of helping from the nail to take away the middle of the floor, allowing Bane to slow that momentum and take away the ball entirely. He's pretty good at dodging screens as well, having some utility at the point of attack. Off the ball, he's engaged and smart, knowing where to position himself as a helper and making the right rotations. On this one, he gaps very aggressively off of a weaker shooting McDaniels to put a body in front of Anthony Edwards in the pick and roll, and when Brooks gets taken out by a screen, he seamlessly switches right onto him, while Dillon peels back to the wing with no advantage created. This is the role they'll likely ask Danny Green to play, although he's now 35 years old and coming off a major injury, so who knows what he actually looks like. The last time we saw him, he was still a very good wing stopper, no longer having the foot speed to keep up with small guards, but capable of staying in front of bigger attackers and swarming them with his length. He has quick and active hands, not only on the ball where he's a pickpocket, but in lanes as well, where he's very active in help, even offering a bit of rim protection. To fill out the rotation, they've got John Conchar, who's just a pretty solid defender, not doing anything special, but having decent size, containing the ball, and getting some steals. He's active and high-motored, helping well, and occasionally offering some paint resistance, while also being one of their go-to guys for chasing shooters. And then that leaves Tyus Jones, someone who may not have the best tools, but has clearly bought in. Not individually shutting anyone down, but remaining active, filling out rotations, and anticipating plays well to either help or jump lanes. With the proper scheme and great usage of personnel, Taylor Jenkins has this defensive unit looking virtually impenetrable, as they were last season. On top of their offense, spearheaded by one of the NBA's best backcourts, this is a team capable of playing on both sides of the ball at a very high level, with the flexibility needed to compete with any team in a playoff setting. I would argue that the most important to take note of, though, is just how young this team actually is. Throughout their entire rotation, only Steven Adams is older than 27, with their big three all landing under 25. That's not to mention all of the young players that they've been developing, such as David Roddy, Zaire Williams, Jake LaRavia, and Kennedy Chandler, among multiple others. So while I already believe them to be a real contender to compete for a championship and a true threat to make it out of the Western Conference, what they have brewing for the future is truly special and could make them one of the best teams of the 2020s decade. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out my website and social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think of the Grizzlies and just how good you believe they are. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.